Welcome to the Global News Podcast on YouTube, where we go behind the headlines. Hello, I'm Janat Jalil, and today we're looking at the second round of indirect talks between Iran and the US since the Iranian government's crackdown on protests at the start of the year, in which thousands of people were killed. The Iranian authorities are talking about progress at the talks, but what do Iranians themselves make of it? Well, we're joined from Tehran by our chief international correspondent, Lyse Doucet. And I should tell you that she's reporting from Iran on condition that none of her material is used on the BBC's Persian service. And these restrictions apply to all media organizations operating in Iran. So, Lyse, the Iranians at the talks in Geneva are talking of progress.
As we record this conversation, it's just about 6 o'clock in the evening here in Tehran, and we've only heard so far from the Iranian delegation, but the foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, has said that the two sides were able to agree on what he said was a set of guiding principles. And even more, he said they are going to both go away and work on the draft text of a possible deal. Now, if that's confirmed by the Americans, that does represent significant progress. Bear in mind, when they went in, there was a lot of discussion, well, would the United States agree to Iran's demand to only focus on its nuclear program, not all the other issues, including ballistic missiles that senior members of President Trump's team and countries such as Israel are insisting have to be part of any agreement. I have to say that here in Tehran, we had spoken to one of the top negotiators, the deputy foreign minister, Majid Ravanchi, just before they left for Geneva, and he was really indicating that the Iranians understood now that they had to make compromises if they wanted to see sanctions lifted. And so we believe that they did make some compromise proposals, and that may be helping to move the talks along.
And these talks were held in a context of saber rattling by both sides, in particular the US military buildup in the region.
Yes, both sides are saying they prefer a deal. They hope they can do it through diplomacy, but both sides as well are saying they're preparing for war. You discussed on this podcast before the military buildup of American military might in the Arabian Sea. It continues apace. Yesterday, Iran announced that its elite Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps were carrying out naval drills in the Strait of Hormuz. That's an absolutely critical waterway for the world's maritime traffic. So both of them are saying for President Trump, he's saying, if you don't do a deal, I'm going to hit you again. And remember, Iran did see that 12-day war last year with Israel, which drew in the United States, attacking its nuclear sites. And Iran is saying, well, if you hit us, we're going to hit you back with even greater force.
Given that President Trump was, when the protests broke out, talking about America being locked and loaded, about the US coming to help the protesters, what do Iranians make of these talks now going ahead in the wake of so many deaths? We're talking about possibly 7,000, possibly more people having been killed in the security forces' crackdown on those protests.
Yes, there's still no certainty on the numbers. International human rights groups have been trying to keep track of the numbers. It's a horrific death toll, no matter what number you put on it. The government is still insisting the number was about 3,100. Human rights groups are saying it's more than 7,000, and there are projections that it could be even higher. And yes, President Trump, in his multiplicity of messages, I think the world knows now that he does tend to change his mind. And for Iran, it's about that he's sending conflicting signals. Sometimes he just talks about a nuclear deal. Sometimes he talks about regime change. And yes, when the protests were at their peak, and indeed when they were actually were easing because of the lethal force being used by the government, he reassured the protesters that help was on the way. He called on them to take control of the institutions. More than one person here that we've been talking to as we go about the city said, well, President Trump promised he would come and help us, the protesters, and no help came, and they felt very, very let down. I have to say that on this visit to Iran, I have been so struck by just how raw the emotion and the anger and the pain still is after those protests. When we go out into the streets and just asking an open question, what's the main worry on your mind now? It has triggered tears on the part of some people, talking about how many people have been killed, lamenting the loss of life. People also talking about how hard it is to live here with inflation soaring at 60%, the real currency plummeting against the dollar. Remember, it was those economic woes which triggered this latest wave of unrest, which then spiraled into much broader calls for much more systemic political change. And so for many Iranians, I've never seen this mood in Iran before, so much so that for the first time, I've heard Iranians say that, well, if the only thing which is going to help us is a strike by the United States, then let our country be attacked. You would never hear that kind of call before. And one woman said to us, no one likes their country to be attacked, but such is their desperation at this moment. On the side of the government, of course, we were here during the last of the 10 days marking the 47th anniversary of the Islamic Republic. They keep pushing back. They organized these massive street rallies like they do every year. But this year they wanted to say, well, look, these are our supporters in the streets, some of the same streets which had been claimed by the protesters. You really have a very, very palpable sense that this is a turning point in Iran and the country is pulling in two directions.
Yes, the government did organise these big rallies to try to show there is still support for them despite that crackdown. As you see it, as you can gauge it from the restrictions that are being imposed on you, how much support genuinely is there?
It's impossible to put a number on it. This is a country of some 92 million people. We've only been in Tehran, but of course the protests last month went nationwide to towns and cities across this country. The weight of this economic crisis are bearing down on everyone. Everyone that we spoke to here said that they were struggling. Even the government admits that there are, as they put it, legitimate economic grievances. The president, Masoud Pezeshkian, even apologized for what he called the shortcomings of the government, and said the government was doing everything it could do to address it. Well, there have been some Iranian analysts which put the percentage of the government support around 10 to 15%. Don't forget, in the last elections in Iran, about 13 million people voted for the most hardline candidates. How can we say about those people who filled the streets, how many of them felt they should come out so as not to come under pressure from the government? How much of that was genuine support? So the government is not without support, but you get a sense now that they are losing support and legitimacy in light of those protests which unfolded in Iran last month. Of course, there was this massive internet blackout is being described as the longest digital shutdown anywhere in history, where almost nothing of the reports and messages could get out because of the bravery and ingenuity of Iranians. We were still getting messages at the BBC about what was happening on the ground. That has been eased now, and the government now feels confident enough to let international media in. The Iranian people are very, very brave people. What we found when we went out into the streets is that when there was a television camera, people were much more cautious. They didn't want to identify themselves. But when their identity was hidden, when they could just ensure that their voices and their views were heard, they spoke out even without asking. People would come up to us and they would say, we want the world to know what we're thinking of, especially young people who lamented to us that they feel they have no future here, in a sense where they say we have nothing to lose now. But of course there is a nervousness after the lethal force which was deployed, and I have to say that for all of the limits and all of the restrictions, it has reinforced my view that there is no alternative to being on the ground face to face, to basically feel what people are saying, what they're going through, and really have a much better sense of what people here have been going through and what they think.
And Lyse, where does Iran and where do its people go from here?
That's the biggest question of all. You really feel that this is the twilight zone where you have an 86-year-old supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who his health is ailing. He's always been a very cautious leader, and now he has presided over. There was a war last year, 12-day war after Iran was attacked by Israel. It also drew in the United States. There's been this new wave of protests, huge challenges facing the Islamic Republic. In fact, the biggest challenges that they have faced to their rule since their own uprising in 1979, which ousted the Shah. Is there going to be a deal? There's some signs in which there could possibly be a new deal. Will that be enough? Will it just be a pause? Or will there be another deadly war? It is a moment of great unpredictability and also of great peril.
Lyse, thank you. That was Lyse Doucet, our chief international correspondent, reporting from Tehran. And if you like this episode, please do subscribe to us here on YouTube. And if there are any other stories you'd like us to cover, please leave a comment below. And for more international news, you can always download our Global News podcast from wherever you get your podcasts.